from the river to the sea means Israel will no longer exist. And you see people supporting this and really showing their true face. And I want to tell these people, you are actively hurting Israelis and Palestinians by sitting from the sidelines and encouraging terrorists to fight.
Welcome to Manhattan Insights, a Manhattan Institute production. I'm your host, Reihan Salam. On the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, the Iranian-backed terrorist organization Hamas launched a brutal surprise attack on Israel that involved the killing of small children, the elderly, and hundreds of other vulnerable women and men. Here in the U.S., this atrocity has sparked outrage, but it has also brought to the surface a virulent strain of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, not least on social media and on college campuses across the country. While countless Americans have spoken up in solidarity with the Israeli people, some activist groups and academics rushed to support Hamas in the wake of its massacre of Israeli civilians, creating a sense of fear and dread. Many worry that violent extremists could target Jewish communities across America. To learn about these dynamics, I'm joined today by Yael Bar-Tur, one of the nation's most accomplished social media strategists and co-author of the Good for the Jews Substack. Yael joins us from Tel Aviv, where she's been for over 3 weeks. Now an independent social media consultant, Yael has deep experience in security issues and terrorism, having served as social media director for the NYPD from 2016 to 2020. Earlier in her career, Yael served in the IDF as a press liaison. Yael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is an incredibly grim moment for Israel and Friends of Israel. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about exactly what it is that happened this past weekend, just the nature of the attack, so that people can really get their heads around the facts.
Yeah, so what happened is Saturday morning we woke up to the sounds of, I can tell at least through the way my day unfolded, sirens in Tel Aviv, which is fairly rare, sirens meaning incoming missile attacks, but something that we've become so accustomed to and so used to that the joke that you hear a lot of people now in the media say, or not really a joke, but they say, we at first we thought it was only rockets. We woke up to that, and as the hours unfolded, we started seeing pictures and videos coming in from southern Israel around the Gaza Strip area. So right outside the Gaza Strip, there are plenty of towns, kibbutzim, cities, IDF bases. This is about maybe a 2-hour drive from Tel Aviv, of terrorists driving around these communities, showing up in Ring doorbell cameras with their guns drawn. And it happened to be my nephew's bar mitzvah that day. So we were sitting at the bar mitzvah. A lot of people didn't show up, and we thought at first that these are just rumors. Maybe we shouldn't be alarmed. But as the day unfolded, we realized the magnitude of what happened, and now we can say a few days in that what happened was thousands, we don't know exactly how many thousands of Hamas terrorists got through the Gaza fence, apparently through a sophisticated cyber attack that disabled the fence that is incredibly secure, murdered all the, I believe, 24 female soldiers that are in charge of watching the fence, and got in to these towns. Just, I'm sure everybody's seen the photos by now, but not for the faint of heart, but basically brutally murdering, kidnapping, raping women, children, babies, elderly. Up until now, we've have over 1,000 people dead in Israel, over 100 people that have been kidnapped to Gaza, and an unknown number of terrorists still inside Israel right now that we can't account for. There's also a northern border that is heating up in Syria and Lebanon. So it's been, I think that the whole country is still quite quite in shock.
You have experience both in the U.S., but you were born and raised in Israel and served in the IDF. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the mood when you look to fellow Israelis, when you look to reservists, when you look to just the impact that it's had in recent days. I just wonder if you could share some insight from the ground.
Yeah. The mood is, it's all over the place. Every single person is heartbroken, gut-wrenched. There is not one person who has not been affected by this. We're a small country, 9 million people. We all know somebody who was killed or injured or, keep constantly hearing about more and more people who have a family member who was killed or kidnapped. Everybody kind of knows everybody here. We're heartbroken. We're angry. I'll be completely honest. We're angry at that this happened. We have a lot of faith in our military and security systems, and there was a sense that we felt unprotected. We're not used to this kind of thing happening because we're so strong, and they did manage to get us. I mean, they got in. I'm happy to say that since in the days coming since what I love most about the Israelis is just this beautiful resilience and coming together that has taken over, and just the strength of these people. You hear stories coming out of heroism, of people dying while protecting others with their body, dying while driving in and out of live fire to rescue people. There's a beautiful story of an old woman, a grandmother, who had terrorists in her house for about, 12 hours, holding her at gunpoint, and she kept feeding them and giving them coffee and asking them their names and about their families, all the while she was signaling to the police that was outside her house and giving them information so that eventually the police could come in and kill them. And thankfully that woman and her husband are fine. We hear stories about military people who lost a son, who lost a family member and showed up the next day for reserve duty. So this is what we know how to do. We know how to come together. I have no doubt that we'll get through this as a nation. Flights are packed from all over the world of Israelis coming in for reserve duty. And that's something that terrorists will never have, that kind of unity of being a small country under siege. And, Reihan, it's important to remember also the context from this. The last year or so in Israel has been one of the most difficult in our in internal history. Large-scale protests against the government, of which I was part of, and would still be, and very huge rift between right and left in Israel, between secular and religious. We've all put that aside right now. There's plenty of blame to go around, trust me, but there will be a time and day for that blame. Right now, we're all coming together. There's not one person who was protesting the government who said, no, I'm not going to go help. No, we all know exactly that when we're needed, we're going to show up.
You are someone who's thought very deeply about social media and what you might call information warfare. It seems very clear that in addition to the savagery of this attack, this act of terrorism, that there is also a dimension of trying to shape perceptions of what's happened, trying to manipulate information, part of this larger project of trying to dehumanize the Israeli and Jewish people. I wonder if you could give us a bit of context about how the Hamas terror attack was received globally, just for you as a trained observer, and just what you're thinking about the information environment right now.
Yeah. So I'll tell you on a personal level, I'm steeped deep into it. Like I said, everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to do something. And everybody does what they can, and that's what I can do. So I've been living on Twitter, which, has been just a very powerful platform the last few days, and telling these stories. The information warfare, I'll start with Hamas and Hezbollah, like Terrorism 101, right? Terrorism is meant to terrify. It's meant to, hurt a small amount of people or a large amount of people in order to influence politics. Hamas played themselves in this case, because what they did by showing this brutality, by the way, all these brutal photos and videos, not all of them, but a lot of them that are coming out from Hamas. They are proud of what they have done. They are putting out these videos we see them on Palestinian Telegram channels, and then they hit the media here. They are putting out these videos of mutilated bodies of women, of children, but they've received the opposite effect. I feel like it just makes us stronger, and it makes the world just completely horrified and shocked, but not scared, angry. What's happening in the U.S. Progressive movement? Well, let's talk about the good stuff first, I guess. I think, unless I'm completely in an echo chamber, but I think the stories are getting out there. People are seeing, people around the world, people who don't necessarily align with Israel, are seeing the horrors of what's happening here and responding to it in the right way, which is to stand behind Israel in its war against Hamas, against terrorism, against Hezbollah. Unfortunately, you do have people who, I don't know, Reihan, if to attribute this to evil or ignorance or both. But there are so many people in the U.S., politicians, in academia, the academic organizations, specifically the Arab, Muslim, Black student caucuses, are outdoing themselves to see who can downplay this more and who can support Hamas more. And I think something really deep, a deep crack has been opened. I feel like the masks are off. I think that, I've been thinking about a lot the last few days. These, we see these messages from all these student organizations, and I don't know if perhaps you'd want to link to them in the show notes. Talking about how these Hamas fighters are liberating their land, how they are fighting for freedom by beheading babies, how they are going to finally have Palestine from the river to the sea, which might just be a hashtag for people sitting in Brooklyn who don't know where Israel is. But for us, it means something pretty clear. From the river to the sea means all of Israel, means Israel will no longer exist. And you see people supporting this and really unfortunately showing their true face. And I want to tell these people two things. I don't know that they listen to this podcast, but maybe their parents or their friends or families do. I want to tell them two things. First of all, it's okay if you were wrong. It's okay if you don't know enough about the conflict. I don't expect you to know enough. If you were just going along because it's not too late to learn more and understand what's happening. And the second thing is, you are actively hurting Israelis and Palestinians by sitting from the sidelines and encouraging terrorists to fight. We have been, this war-torn region has been yearning for peace for so long. We've made incredible progress with the Abraham Accords, progress that I didn't think I'd see in my lifetime. There are so many people in this region, I want to believe, who want peace. In Gaza, I hope there are people who want peace. By telling Hamas, keep going. Go. Kill the infiltrator. Kill the infidel. do what you need to do. You are complicit in hurting Israelis and Palestinians. What you should be doing instead is supporting Israel and the U.S. elimination of Hamas for Palestinian people and for Israeli people.
As an Israeli who spent much of your adult life in the U.S., I wonder if you could help us understand, from your vantage point, why the symbolic resonance of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and why political factions in the U.S. and the wider West so fixate on it, are so dedicated. You've described this group of extremists who have no personal sense of the conflict. They have no personal investment, and yet they project these fantasies onto groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. They just, portray them as anti-colonial liberators. What work is that doing? Where does this come from? What is your understanding of the role this plays in the imagination of these people outside of the country who just don't have that visceral connection?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the memes I like to use. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Mean Girls. But there's a famous quote there that the popular girl says, "Why are you so obsessed with me?" And it's something I like to use sometimes because I am baffled by it. I think there are a lot of different reasons. I think, there's a large Jewish population, well, not large, but a very influential Jewish population in America. And people feel like they're invested in it. I think it looks to people as, a white against brown thing, which is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. I don't know if you've been to Israel, but, most of the population is, I think more than 50% of the population is what we call Arab Jews, right? So Egyptian, Iraqi, Irani, Moroccan. There are so many stories, unfortunately, because Israelis and Palestinians look exactly the same, of Israelis mistaking the Hamas terrorists for officers and IDF rescue. But for some reason, people like to put things in little boxes. And I think a lot of it, and I'm sorry if this is offensive, I love America. It's my home. I love Americans. I'm very patriotic, as an immigrant is. But I think so much of this is a young American arrogance of, I had compared it to the people who, remember those kind of late night man on the street interviews where they go interview people and they ask them, who was the first president? And they don't know, but they're so happy to be on TV, right? And we all laugh at them. There's this kind of arrogance that people think that they need to have an opinion about everything. And they think that people care what they have to say about these things that don't affect them. And if it's framed to you through a TikTok thing that you read or a 4-minute NPR story that you listened to once 2 years ago, you think you have it covered, and you think of it in very black and white issues. And I think that is a lot of it. And that is, by the way, my most generous explanation of it. The least generous explanation is that there is a lot of, unfortunately, Muslim anti-Semitism. It's, I think, something that should be okay to speak about now. It's, I wrote on my Twitter feed that people who are afraid to criticize Hamas because they think that Muslims support this are themselves incredibly racist, because there are so many Muslims who don't want this, and I get messages from them, and but unfortunately there is a deep-rooted hatred of Jews, hatred of Israel, that has come into definitely social media, where, don't forget, if we're talking number-wise, you have just millions of people in Arab and Muslim countries who are very active, and unfortunately on college campuses as well.
Talk to us about some of what we've been hearing from not just college campuses, but elite college campuses. It's something that has, given the incredible influence and visibility these institutions have in American public life, I think has attracted a fair bit of attention. So I wonder if there was any incident that you found particularly striking that you think is worth sharing.
Yeah, I think the like I said earlier, something has cracked. I think the statements that we see coming out of a lot of student organizations that are saying kind of with, mealy-mouthed kind of like, we don't want civilians killed, that's not good, but, this is the resistance and this is how we liberate the land and we support, the Palestinians in their effort to do this. I think a lot of it would be perhaps unsurprising if it was not in the context of the last 2 years, where every time there was a police shooting, let's say, or every time there was something in the media, I would get an email from my campus. I would get an email from my gym that I hadn't gone to in 3 years. My air conditioner company would change their Instagram photo, whatever. When you put it in this context, you realize how incredibly performative everything has been over the last few years, because then when you see people struggling to condemn this brutality that we've seen, you kind of understand that nobody ever meant anything all along, So it really, I hope it is eye-opening for people. I don't consider myself a reactionary. I have a lot of criticism of what we call, wokeness or PC culture. But I think now something's been shattered. A mask has come off, and we see that it's just a lot worse than we thought. At least that's my personal opinion. And I want to say something, and in case this isn't clear. Yes, there are Gazans who are suffering, 100%. They are suffering because Hamas is taking billions of dollars in aid and using it to build their mansions, to buy their luxury cars in Qatar where they live, to shop at Gaza's luxury malls that they built for themselves, and converting their power plants and their water systems into missile launching systems. So there is no doubt in my mind that Palestinians in Gaza are suffering, and I would not want to be in their place, and I don't think anybody deserves it. But if your leaders choose violence again and again and again at your expense, I'm just hoping that maybe I'm being naive, but maybe we could see a sort of budding Iranian revolution coming out of Gaza, of people. And again, when it comes to the campuses and the wokeness, this is the stuff that's the most mind-boggling to me, because you want to help these people, right? You don't want people to live in the situation. Then how can you support Hamas? How can you support, violence? How do you think it helps? It makes things so much worse.
You've observed that, of course, Israeli society is divided on any number of constitutional questions, political questions. Israel is a thriving multi-party democracy with a very disputatious public culture. But it does seem as though one line of argument you hear from critics of Israel is that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism aren't the same, that to be an anti-Zionist is not necessarily to be hateful. Now, I will say from my perspective of limited understanding that, in fact, there often is a very tight connection between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. I wonder if you could shed some light on that and just the idea that these two things are meaningfully separable.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you dumb everything down like we do today in our culture into tweet form, and you think you have everything covered when you look through the lens of identity politics, the lens of black and white, oppressed and oppressor, whatever, then you could say that, you could say that if you criticize Israel, that means you're anti-Israel, right? Which is absolutely ridiculous. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean criticism of Israel. Anti-Zionism, the kind that we see on today's college campuses, where, by the way, even some of the most leftist Israelis I know cannot speak their mind on college campuses when it comes to Israel. I mean, they can. They're not going to get like physically hurt, but you know what I mean. Criticism of Israel is fine, but anti-Zionism is denying our right to exist in our homeland. And I'm not a religious person, so forgive me, the co-host of my podcast who's Orthodox. I don't care that this land was given to us by God or whatever. No, I know that we have been here continuously for thousands of years. We have achieved status through the United Nations. We have offered peace to our neighbors at every single turn, and at every single turn been denied by Palestinians. And all you need to do is look to 1948, to the history of the founding of Israel, when the UN said, let's split the baby in half. And Israel said yes, and the Arabs said no. They weren't called Palestinians back then. They only started referring to themselves politically as Palestinians later on. And so if you understand the history and you're still an anti-Zionist, then you're either a fundamentalist, which is, I guess I know where I stand with you if you are, or you're just ill-informed. But if you think being critical of the government, which, let's face it, you won't, even in the best times, you won't find an Israeli who doesn't have a lot of opinions about how things should be run. If you're critical of the government, you can still be a Zionist.
Yael, I wonder, you've dedicated so much of your professional life to fighting crime, improving public safety. New York City is home to a large, vibrant, thriving Jewish community. And there are many people, not just in New York City, but in cities across the United States, really in cities across the world, where there are diaspora Jewish communities that feel a sense of fear and dread right now. These are, people who know very well that Hamas's sponsor, Iran, has had no compunction about attacking civilians, not just in Israel, but also overseas. And I wonder if you could shed some light on that. What is it that we should know about to advance community protection? What is it that we can do to help ensure the safety of these communities, both at home and abroad?
Yeah. So I think these communities are very aware of that. I don't think there's a Jewish community right now that doesn't have some type of security. I was in maybe 6 months ago in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. There is a very small Jewish community there. It's a very small town, and I showed up to the synagogue, and there was a armed guard there because, we're very well aware of the threats. It's happened before. It happened in Argentina against, Jewish, I believe the Jewish center there and the embassy. Hezbollah is a global terrorist organization. It's an Iran state-sponsored terror organization that so far has not, has been kind of tinkering at our border. I don't know, maybe by the time this goes out, they'll be more active. But I think there's reason to be vigilant. All I can say to non-Jewish listeners is, I think the support and the vocal and visible support means a lot. They need to know that if they mess with the Jews of America, they're messing with America. If they mess with the Jews of Sweden, they're messing with Sweden. These are attacks against humanity. This is not an attack against a religion. So, popping your head into the synagogue and just saying hello or displaying an Israeli flag, I don't know if I can recommend that for safety reasons. I could tell you that I would be doing that right now, maybe because I'm, a little reckless like that, but it's definitely speaking up. When people ask me what can they do, I say speak up, tell people what's happening here in the world, because we know this momentum, it's so sad to call it a momentum, but right now people are supporting Israel. It's not going to last, right? Because there is going to be an escalation. We are going to destroy Hamas in Gaza. People will be hurt. People may be hurt in the north of Israel and, the northern borders. Unfortunately, if people are hurt in other countries, the people from other countries might say, oh, this is because of the Israelis. So please speak up. Tell people the horrors that are happening here. Share a story, maybe one story of heroism, maybe one story of a mother who's talking on the news about her son or her daughter that's being held in captivity. The world needs to know what's going on here, because my fear is that the days go by, this is going to get off the headlines, and all of a sudden, the pundits and everybody's going to come out and say, well, maybe Israel shouldn't have done this, and this is why this happened to them, and maybe they should be more, less, less hawkish on their policy. I say this as a member of the left wing in Israel. I've always been left wing here. I'm never voted right of center in my life, but we're in a different place now. There is no room for this kind of gentleness, and we need people to know about it. Right now, they're talking about on the news there are terrorists, Hamas terrorists, sitting in Israeli hospitals, taking up hospital beds, being treated by Israeli doctors. People are furious. I'm furious, but I also know this is who we are.
You mentioned before your avid use of Twitter/X, and there is an ongoing conversation that's very relevant to you as a social media strategist practitioner, which is that under its new leadership, under the guidance of Elon Musk, the platform has changed its approach to moderation. And having very closely followed this unfolding conversation about the savage attacks, I wonder if you have any immediate thoughts or impressions about that content moderation debate. Do you believe that it has degraded the quality of the platform, or do you think that it's ultimately been a good thing to help surface, just news and information, including misinformation?
Yeah. I mean, look, as a social media strategist, the jury's still out for me on whether or not the changes are good or bad. Right now, in this moment in time, they've been, unfortunately, incredibly helpful at putting out some of the more graphic and gory images coming out of Israel. And I know people don't want to see them, but I feel like it's our duty to show them. So that's one thing about the platform that has been helpful. The other thing is that I will never take seriously anybody who calls himself a misinformation expert or a disinformation expert again. And this is an area that I'm very interested in. And actually, I wish if it were a real field, I wish I could be active in it, because I'm super interested in stopping spread of lies and stopping spread of fake things. But I see the people and some of the organizations who are claiming to speak for truth, and the things that they are choosing to pick apart and the things that they are choosing not to pick apart, and it's just caused complete distrust for me. So, you know, if the option is having some, you know, quorum of people decide what can go on and what can't, or if just having all the complete, you know, gates of hell flood open, sadly, I prefer the latter, until we find a better solution to what the kind of mis/disinformation, you know, world is like now. I think there is a good way to do content moderation. There's not a perfect way to do it. I don't think we're there yet.
Having served with distinction the NYPD and its efforts to become more effective at communicating, in its efforts to just really embrace diverse communities, I wonder if you have some thoughts on what law enforcement can do. Long before the Hamas terror attack, there was a disturbing surge in hate crimes, very much including anti-Semitic hate crimes in cities around the U.S. And I wonder if you have any thoughts, you know, for your former colleagues in law enforcement about what they can do to help stem that tide and to try to contain that threat of violence.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I can only speak to the communication side, and I'm sure, you know, NYPD has such an extensive counterterrorism, you know, experience and institutional memory that I'm sure what needs to be done behind the scenes is being done. On a communication level, I think it's important to show support, show the community, the Jewish community, and it's not just the Jewish community, that you're with them. Don't be afraid to say the word Israel. You know, people are lots of organizations, and I've heard from, you know, police officer friends that are very supportive, but they say, you know, oh, our organization doesn't want to put out a statement or something like that because they don't want to get political. And now is the time to get political. It doesn't just send a message to the Jewish and Israeli and frankly pro-humanity people, but it also sends a message to the people who excuse this violence and the people who support this violence.
I will say I was at a demonstration here in New York City, and it was striking and encouraging to see, you know, a couple of elected officials who very much consider themselves strong progressives, being, you know, willing to stand up and be seen at a pro-Israel rally, and I think that is, you know, something that is an encouraging sign.
Yeah, it is. And again, you know, being pro-Israel or being a Zionist, it doesn't mean that you agree with everything. It doesn't mean that you want to occupy, you know, Gaza or occupy the West Bank. It just means that you think we have a right to live, frankly. So I'm hoping that at least comes through now to people, that they know that this is not a political statement to be pro-Israel. The other thing that's incredibly heartwarming is to see Iranians, both in Iran and Iranian expats in Europe and in the U.S., show up to some of these rallies, probably at great, you know, like a threat to themselves. But I think they get it. I think they understand what we're going through because they also are living with a murderous fundamental regime. And it means the world. And it's kind of, it's almost funny, right? That you see like Iranians supporting Israel, but like, you know, Brooke, who has an MFA and has her pronouns on her face, doesn't. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of wild to me. Not surprising, but wild.
Yael, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you're doing to educate Americans and the broader public about what is happening right now. Thank you for everything you're doing to help keep people safe. We're so grateful to you as a friend of the Institute, and just so grateful to you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.